aside from being one of the leaders of the Blackhawks, he's also a fellow hockey dad, because that's where I see Stan most of the time at youth hockey rinks all over northern Illinois. So please, without further ado, join me in congratulating Stan Bowman, the honoree of the PCA-Chicago Excellence in Sports Leadership Award. Stan, come on.
I'd like to start off by, first of all, recognizing the other people that are here, especially the young athletes. It's obviously an honor for you, and it's nice for me to be able to share in that. I'd like to thank the Positive Coaching Alliance for including me in this memorable night. You know, it's certainly fun to look out here and see the young recipients and the finalists for this scholarship award. I know what it's like to be a young athlete and aspiring to a scholarship, so certainly congratulations. I thought I'd start here by mentioning a few things in my background, and then I'll tell you some stories about some Blackhawks and try to relate it to some of the themes that we're here to talk about. As Rob mentioned, I've been with the Blackhawks for 14 seasons. And I'm a fellow parent of two young boys that play hockey. I've got a little girl who's 3 years old, so she's not into sports yet. But I certainly can appreciate the importance of having a positive influence on your children. I go to the hockey rinks. I actually ran into Rob last weekend. We crossed paths as our boys were playing hockey, and I can see both sides of it. You see the parents that are positive role models for their kids, and you see some that need some work. And I try to do my best to counsel them on the importance of making it a fun experience. And there's a lot of things that we can gain through sports. I think it's an outlet for kids to learn how to be part of a team, and there's certain attributes of that which are overlooked often. And one of the things we've talked about tonight a couple of times is the triple impact competitor. And I think when you break that down, the three things we try to look at are: how can you make yourself better, how can you make your teammates better, and finally, how can you make the game itself better, whatever game you do play. And one of the things I want to start with is talk a little bit about our captain, Jonathan Toews. For those of you who don't know, Jonathan was named our captain. He's the youngest captain ever for the Blackhawks back in 2008. He was 20 years old, and just to kind of set the scene for the fans that aren't too familiar with the Blackhawks, recently our team's been very strong, but up until that point, we were struggling. I had started with the Blackhawks in 2000, and the first 5 or 6 years, we were not on top of the league at all. We were having a hard time. And around 2007, we had two young players come to our organization. They're household names right now, but Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews, they came in that 2007-2008 season, and immediately our team had some credibility. These are two young players that were, future stars, and obviously now here we are 5 or 6 years later, and we're all familiar with those two players. But at the time, Patrick Kane was this little 18-year-old skinny kid that came to the organization, and I don't know if too many people know this, but he actually lived with me his first year. He lived in my basement, and we go back. It was nice to see him on the video there, wishing me well. But he is more than just a player on our team. He's a close friend, and at the time, my boys were, I think, 2 and 5 years old, and Patrick was sort of their big brother that year. And I'll never forget some of the things that now you look back on, and it brings us back to our point here, where he just, as good as he was that first year, he ended up winning the Rookie of the Year in the NHL. every time we would sit down at night, he'd watch a lot of games, hockey games with myself and my boys, and he would talk about how he wanted to get better and how he really needed to get stronger. He had to work on his shot. He was disappointed that he wouldn't score more goals, and here he was the best player on our team at that time, he and Jonathan Toews, and he was talking about how he was going to get better. And I remember him leaving at the end of that season. We didn't make the playoffs that year, but we had a dramatic improvement from the previous years. And he told me he had this plan where he was going to go home and he was going to practice his shot all summer long because he realized that he wasn't good enough relative to some of the guys who were more experienced. And sure enough, he came back that next year and he had a better shot, and he was a little bit quicker, a little bit stronger, and he had that drive to be better, even though he was already a star at a young age. He had that inner drive to be a better player. So, I saw an attribute in Patrick and Jonathan Toews as well, as they're very motivated individuals, and they want to take it upon themselves to improve their game. As good as they are, they realize that there's another level they can get to. So at the end of their first season, we had our first ever convention, which is an event we have in the summertime. It took place in July, and it was the first time we'd done it, and we made a big announcement then, and that was when we named Jonathan our captain. And at the time, Dennis Savard was the head coach of our team. And for those of you who are hockey fans, Dennis is a Hall of Fame player. He was an electrifying player for the Blackhawks for many years, predominantly through the 80s and early 90s. And we met with Jonathan in the hotel, and we let him know that he was going to be the captain. And I was thinking back to when I was 20 years old, and I can imagine if someone called me in and said, we're going to turn over the team and name you captain, and he just looked at us, he stood up and he shook our hand and he said, I won't let you guys down. This is something that I've always looked forward to, as being a leader, and I promise I will do my best. And I remember the advice that Dennis gave him at the time. He said, Jonathan, you don't have to do this all yourself. One of the attributes of being a good leader is making yourself better, and don't get too distracted with trying to do other people's jobs. Focus on yourself and let the other stuff come naturally. And that next year, we didn't win the cup that year, but we went all the way to the semifinals. And Jonathan and Patrick were well on their way to being stars in the league. And you look at the way Jonathan approaches the captain of the Blackhawks, and it's not a surprise that our team has continually climbed with him at the helm. He's a very focused individual, but he also wants to make himself better, and he requires a lot of himself. He has high expectations, and he also understands the importance of being a good teammate, and that's something that I think we can all talk and appreciate. The next little story I'm going to talk about is we fast forward a year, and we're starting the 2009 and 2010 season, and by that point, our best players on the team by far were Patrick Kane, Jonathan Toews, and Duncan Keith. And those three guys were all entering the final year of their contract. So I actually took over as general manager in July of 2009. And one of the first things I had to look at was these were our best players, and they were entering the final year of their contract. And I remember when I took the job, I made 2 phone calls that first day. I called the agent for Patrick and Jonathan. They shared the same agent, a guy named Pat Brisson. And I said, we have 1 year to go with these 2 players, but we're going to make it work, and we're going to get them re-signed. And then I called the agent for Duncan Keith, and I said the same thing, like, this is our #1 priority. I was new on the job as a general manager, and I realized the importance of having those guys to continue what we had started to build. We hadn't won anything yet. We were ascending as a team. So we started the negotiations, and it takes time. You go back and forth, and we get into October, and they're all sort of at different stages. But the negotiation for Jonathan was getting closer and closer, and we essentially had finished it. by the end of October, and it was right around this time of the year. I wanted to get that done. I wanted to get it announced, and I wanted to get signed, and I thought it would be a good symbol for our team, because there were a lot of questions, like saying, well, when are you going to re-sign these players? Is there a chance you might not be able to keep them? Are they going to go somewhere else? And it was starting to become a bit of a distraction. So I remember calling the agent, and I said, okay, well, let's we've basically agreed on all the terms. Let's get it going. And I got this funny feeling. He said, yeah, I think you should probably talk to Jonathan. And and I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, we don't have a problem with it. I just think it's better if you talk to Jonathan about it. It's easier for him to explain, and I don't want to misstate what he's saying. So I was a little bit uncomfortable here. I thought we had the deal done, and I wasn't sure what it was all about. And so we planned to go to dinner, and he said, why don't you just come over to my house? And so I went over, just the two of us, and we sat down at the table, and I said, is there something wrong? Something you want to talk about? And he said, well, what's the rush? And I said, oh, well, there's not a rush, but why would we delay? I mean, we got the deal done. And so he looked really fidgety. He looked uncomfortable, and he said, I don't know. I don't think we need to rush into it. So I said, is there a problem with the contract? He said, no, it's not that. It's just. He's like, I don't understand why we have to do me before we do Patrick and Duncan. Like he said, I can't walk into the locker room and say, oh, I got my deal done, and these two guys here are just as good as me, and they haven't gotten theirs done. Why can't we do them at the same time? And I said, well, it's okay with me if we do them at the same time, but theirs are not quite there yet. There's other things at play, and it takes time. And he said, well, then let's just wait. He's like, if we have to do mine in January or February, we could wait till the summertime. I don't want to. I'm not bigger than the team. He said, even though I said, well, but you're the captain, and people look at you, and he said, but I'm no better than they are. He said, we win as a team and we lose as a team, and I'm not going to sign my contract until the three of us are sitting next to one another when we do our press conference. And I think it just goes to show you that that's who we have as our leader. He doesn't look at himself as anything other than another player on the team. And when you see someone like that as the person who has values, he understands what it's like to win as a team and lose as a team. One of the things that I credit Jonathan for is he's a stand-up guy, and when things don't go well, he comes out and he acknowledges it. Like, as the athletes here, you're going to have success, and you're also going to have failures, and it's easy to be the person to answer the questions when things go well, but when things don't go your way, the sign of a real leader is somebody who's willing to answer the hard questions and accept responsibility for the good and the bad. And I think Jonathan has done that for us, and he's the reason that our team is where it is right now. And when you have someone like that at the helm, I think it certainly sets the whole direction of your franchise the right way. And the other question I get quite often is people ask me what kind of advice that I've gotten from my father. And for those of you who don't know, my dad is Scotty Bowman. He's a longtime NHL coach. He's the winningest coach in the history of the National Hockey League. So I've grown up around the game my whole life, and I've had a chance to kind of sit on the sidelines and watch him do what he did as a coach, and I learned a lot from him. And people say, well, what do you remember as a little kid? What kind of advice did he give you? And I do remember this one thing that that he told me, and he used to carry this thing around in his pocket. It was a saying, and if you give me a moment here, I'm going to read it just because I don't want to get it incorrect. But he would tell me the important thing, the most important thing you have to remember, whatever you choose to do, whether it's in sports or just as a friend or a family member, is the importance of your attitude. So he said, let me read this to you, and I will start right now. It's called Attitude. The longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude to me, is more important than facts. It's more important than the past, than education, than money, than circumstances, than failure, than success, or what other people say or do. It's more important than appearance, or giftedness, or skill. The remarkable thing is, we have a choice every day regarding the attitude we will embrace for that day. We cannot change our past. We cannot change the fact that people will act in a certain way. We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is play on the one string that we have, and that is our attitude. I'm convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. And that message is something I talk to our players about all the time, because things aren't always going to go your way, and things aren't going to be easy. But you have a choice every day when you wake up. And if you're going to approach things with a positive attitude and to try to be an uplifting force, you're going to have a lot of success. And I think, to bring it back full circle here, the Positive Coaching Alliance is something that preaches that. We want to be positive, we want to be upbeat, we want to be a good role model for the young athletes, and that's the most important thing I'd like to try to impart to you today. Thank you.